Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Leonardo. I'm a national contact point in Luxembourg. Thank you all for coming. And you're here today to hear about evaluation in Horizon Europe. We have a row of panelists, two here and one online that is going to join us, that is already together here with us. And I'd like to start by asking you the first question, just to understand the background of the audience. How many of you come, just a show of hands very quick, how many of you come from the public sector or from the government or policies or something? Right? How many of you from the private sector? One. And the academic sector? No one. Okay. So just a quick housekeeping. So I'll give at the beginning a very basic introduction of what we're going to talk about here today. Then I'll give space for the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get to the questions. So to begin, I will assume that all of you know what Horizon Europe is, what topics, calls, clusters, and everything is, and that during the submission process. So when you have a project that you want to submit, you also understand basically the fundamentals of the structure of a proposal, right? So the three basic sections of it. So excellence, impact, implementation, and what roughly goes into each one of those. For example, within excellence, you typically have, you talk about the problem, you define the scope of what you're working on, and your actual method, right? So what you're going to do with it. You talk about the state of the art, open science, social science and humanities, gender aspects, and strategy. Then when you move to the section 2, so the impact section, so the titles are also self-explanatory, but besides talking about impact, you talk about the communication, dissemination, and exploitation of your project. So how you're gonna achieve that impact, so the pathway for that impact. You talk about KPIs and the business, societal, and environmental impact of your proposal, and the target groups for that, obviously. And then finally, in the implementation session, so the final one, is the work plan, right? So where you describe how you're going to achieve that in terms of like project management, the tasks, the work packages, tasks, milestones, and deliverables, risks and mitigations for everything that you do. So this is the typical comments that we see in the evaluations that we see at the end. So now that you're, assuming you're familiar with all this and you're submitting your proposals and you want to increase your success rate, right? You want to get better at doing what you do. There are many ways of doing it. One of them that I would suggest is reaching your national contact point. If you don't know them yet, they're very knowledgeable. They're really there to help in some ways. Another way could be just submitting a lot of proposals and, let's say, training your own model, right? Like waiting for the response and seeing what it is and fitting it back in. But as you may know, that's not very doable because of the time lag between submitting something, getting feedback, pushing it back in. If you can wait 9 months to reintroduce some knowledge into the system, then it might take a while. And then the third is taking the engineering or the physicist approach, is like breaking down the problem into the smaller pieces, understanding them, and hoping that understanding can help you do better in what you're doing, right? And that's what we're here today to do, to talk about the evaluation process inside Horizon Europe. And for that, I have three panelists today, Iraklis, Kim, and Mike that is online. I'll start with Kim. Could you please introduce yourself and start with your, your one-liner that you want to share with everybody?
Okay, my name's Kim Davis. I come from Norway, and I've been, just to tell you the reason I have all these wrinkles is because I've been an evaluator, I've been a proposal writer, I've been a reviewer, I've been a rapporteur, I've done everything pretty much. And my take home to you, the primary thing I think you need to do and to understand is to actually read the work program. People sometimes, when they are looking for money to fund their research, look at the work program through those eyes. And what you need to do is you need to look at the topics and think, how can my expertise respond to what they want that's been described in the topic?
Iraklis.
Well, from my side, my name is Iraklis Lasakis. I come from Glasgow, from the University of Strathclyde. I'm a naval architect, marine engineer by education and profession, and have been involved in reviews, proposals, and the rapporteur, similar to Kim, not for 35 years though, much less, I would say, than that. But in any case, what I would like to highlight is, starting point to me would be to read the call very, very carefully and try to even pinpoint or isolate or highlight the key messages that come out of this particular call. And of course, then the full process goes ahead with setting up a consortium, developing the drafts, etc., etc. But first of all and foremost, read the proposal, the call very, very carefully.
Thank you. And now we have a mic online.
Hi, my name is Mike Richardson. I'm a senior project manager with Optech BB. I'm located in Berlin, Germany. I've had the pleasure of working with the EU Horizon mechanisms for over 6 years right now, serving as a project reviewer, also submitting. So I've been on the other end and I've heard some very interesting criticisms. And so there's two things I want to say. One, anything that seems like criticism when you're getting from Ideal IST, embrace it, because this is not where the final judgment is made. The more open the people you're working with here can be, sometimes it might be very critical, but better to hear it now than when you're at the review for funding. And number two, make those work packages make sense. Think about this, right? That's the implementation. And I've seen many projects where you've had a beautiful descriptions, but then when it gets to the work package and you leave the question, how is this going to be done? So a piece of advice here is someone that's non-technical, just show the work package to them, maybe a relative or a family member, and just see if they even understand it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. So now moving to the actual panel, the questions that I'll have for you. I'll start with Iraklis, and then each other can comment or contribute or ask a complementary question. So with all the criteria that we just discussed from each one of the sections and each little thing that is looked at, right now, the way Horizon Europe has been evolving, or at least specifically on like Cluster 4 digital, where do you see the biggest emphasis being when you need to choose, how to come up at the end of the consensus meeting or something, where to draw the biggest, successful or not score?
Thanks for the question, Leo. Very, very good question. Where to start from? It's a few things that come to mind. Starting with, first of all three major criteria and area are equally important and need to be fully addressed. Of course, I'm going to talk about the consortium itself. Like, it needs to have good, knowledgeable partners, contributing partners. Although this is not always the case sometimes, but definitely someone needs to be there from the consortium, a good team, a good proportion at least of the consortium to drive the proposal. On the other hand, as you know, EU calls and funding has become more and more competitive. So, especially over the last few years, so the devil lies in the detail. I've seen proposals failing by 0.5, like half a point. So, be very, I would say, very specific, very detailed in what you want to suggest within each one of the three major criteria, and try to be as detailed, specific to the point, but also be able to verify what you suggest with some credible sources of information, something that can be easily identified, and especially within the role of the reviewer, it would be in a sense for you to make their life easier by providing all this to the point information, verifiable information in all three sections, in all three criteria, I would say. What do you think, Kim?
Yes, I agree with you. one piece of advice I have is as an evaluator, you open up the first page, you often read the abstract first. And so spend a lot of time on your abstract, make it a dynamite abstract. But also, if you don't get my attention within the first minute, in other words, this is going to be an interesting project. It's not a regurgitation of what's in the topic, but actually say, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. Very clear and concise. Then I'm impelled to read your proposal with interest and have a positive opinion about it. And I think that's really an important thing that people often forget.
Mike, do you want something to add?
I would say be mindful of something called the sovereignty seal right now and why you want to pursue excellence with your submission. That right now, because of changes of funding made in the European Union, notably a reduction in Horizon transferring funds to the European Defence Fund, that at this point, because of this sovereignty seal, what that means is that when you pursue excellence here, if you don't win the funding via Horizon, because of the newly implemented sovereignty seal program that gives you fast track access to other funding mechanisms. So do a good job here. Really if you have a well-defined project that has a high score, but as it was mentioned earlier, maybe you lose by a half point. That doesn't mean you have lost this work effort because of the sovereignty seal. So I would urge anyone out there to do some research on this and learn how that when you make an excellent submission, that now the EU will allow you to fast track to other buckets of money.
Right. Thank you so much, Mike. Moving to the next question, so addressing each one of the sections in the proposal. Within the excellence section, so the first one, when we talk about methodology, it's hard to just talk about the methods, but how are you going to implement those methods? You may want to put it there in the excellence section or not, or you want to leave it for later for impact. Like how do you choose that? Or let's say you as an evaluator, right? You're not a writer here. Let's say what should go where with respect to methods and the implementation of the methods? Should they go into the excellence part, or should they be split? Let's say logically between the two. You can go first, Kim.
I was afraid you were going to ask that question because I was formulating a different answer. But one thing I was going to just say that I think is important is that remember you have different kinds of evaluators. You've got an evaluator that's probably has an expertise in actually what you're going to do. Then you have an evaluator that is has expertise in the impact, etc. So you need to, and one of the problems I've seen often is in excellence, it's written it needs to be understandable for all the different types of evaluators. So I think that's an important issue. And now I'm going to pass it on to let them talk about it.
Thank you, Kim. Overall, I think again the message needs, and I would agree with you, Kim. It needs to be very clear at the very beginning, so be eye-catching or easily understandable. Of course, having there the challenge that you need to stick within a certain word limit or page limit. You also have to you need to include your figures and tables, etc., which always help. By the way, even highlighting. I would say with different colors, the key messages within the text, within the proposal. So kind of attracting the attention and the stare of the reviewer, the evaluator. Then on the methodology or methods, yeah, absolutely. When it comes to that, it needs to be, again, very straightforward, very, very clear from the very beginning. How do you plan to go about, let's say, beyond the state of the art for the particular call, and again setting up a verifiable path. So not only say that I'm going to achieve this and this and this, which is beyond the state of the art, but how, and of course how can I prove that? Prove that not in an unrealistic way, but in a realistic way based on the existing science, but also looking ahead. And of course, depending on the TRL level, it's another type of proof and verifiable source. We're looking for a TRL, let's say 3 or 4, and another one for TRL 7 type of.
Mike, let me just change the question a little bit for you. So still staying
Yes.
excellence and methods. say for those maybe with an academic background, if you are used to writing papers, right, scientific papers, you approach writing methods in one way in a paper, but then when you write methods in a Horizon Europe proposal, you have to change it, right? It's not exactly the same thing. So how do you, let's say as an evaluator, how do you approach reading the description of a method and how you're going to solve the problem?
Okay, well, what I look for is ultimately, is there an outcome that I can determine from the method described, right? There has to be some type of end state, right, or a transition state. So this is what I'm looking for. Let's say we're speaking about scientific, right? And we have, so let's say a certain experiment is going to be part of a Horizon project, right, to validate a specific outcome. So what I'm looking at is like, where does it go? To be on a very generic and abstract level, methodology, what is the output? Is there a state change? Can this state change be defined? A state change may mean, let me address something else, a TRL advancement. By the way, I would add that using outside oracles as validation for progress in your project is important. Meaning when you have something like TRL, this is something that can be looked at outside of a Horizon project, and you can have some objectivity to this. So I hope that answered the question. I mean, what I'm looking for is the outcome as a reviewer. I may see something very well described, but then if it kind of falls off, if I'm making sense there, because I'm correlating this with a work package and trying to see how this is manifested, where the milestones are. And if I get lost while I'm evaluating this, then it's going to be difficult for me to give a very clear review. I will give a clear review, but if I'm making sense with the answer here, what's the outcome? Where's the state change? Define it so someone else can see it.
Right, very good, thank you. So before we move on, I would like to open the floor for 1 or 2 questions to everything that has come so far. Are there any questions? Or we can continue. Yes.
You spoke about making the reviewer's life easy. When you're reviewing a proposal and you see a state-of-the-art section with 100 references, does your heart soar or sink?
Soars! Awesome! Excuse me. Sorry.
Amazing proposal. Well, you have to strike the balance, I think. As mentioned before, it's writing a proposal. It's not like an academic paper. I'm an academic myself, and we love references, pages of reference at the end of a paper. However, this one is a very good and challenging exercise, like writing a proposal, to try to optimize everything in essence. So you have a number of things to optimize: the space you are provided with, the ideas, the state of the art, the beyond the state of the art, the work packages, etc., etc., etc. And then you have to make this all so concise that there is a golden lining through from the very beginning to the very end, so that everything will be as crystal clear as possible. So to come back to your question, references, in my opinion, at least, are good. They need to be there. They need to be supporting actually the statements. I wouldn't mind if there were 20 or 50, but to me the essence is to be able to support what is being written within the proposal as such.
Yes, but remember you got this page limit. So I think you have to do something like say, there are over 100 references that I have in the appendix or something, but the most important ones for our work are 1, 2, 3, for example, because you're supposed to be showing your expertise, correct? And make sure they're real references. Remember the Chat GPT problem that they make up references. So,
Mike.
Yeah, I would add, when I was excited, it's about 100. I look at that and I'm initially excited, but let me give a warning on this. Someone like me reads your references, and if you put 100 down, I'm going to go through 20, and I can read papers quickly. And generally, if you're putting 100 down, you probably should have a 1,000-page proposal. So that's not what we're going to be doing. Pick quality and be ready for one of your reviewers to go through your references. Anytime I have a project where I find extra time, I do this for self-education. So this is another thing to remember. Not all reviewers are motivated financially. There is a little bit of finance here. Me, I'm learning, and I take this as an opportunity. So when you cite these references, be ready for a reviewer that's going to check, because I have found instances where many references were cited, and I found that they were erroneously put into a project. Someone was thinking they could drop just a bunch of names and links, thinking that someone wouldn't review it. Well, I do review those. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Mike. So I'll move to back to my questions. I'll start with you, Mike, now.
Yes, sir.
So within the impact section, so we're supposed to write there how we're going to achieve that impact that we're promising, right? So let's say the pathway to impact. So you're going to cover KPIs, target groups, dissemination, communication, exploitation. How do you, say if you have to advise a proposer, how do you ensure that you, let's say, you achieve that, right? That you're promising?
I look at the team composition primarily right here. And let me give a hint at what I'm looking at. Let's say we have a very large project, yet there is not one person dedicated to the project management function. And then I'm going to ask impact, how are you going to deliver this if you don't have a single person coordinating all activities? So really, there's a lot of statements, but I look at the people in the team, because ultimately the impact is delivery from people. And if I see that the team is not well represented, or I see work packages, I'll go straight to work packages. And if I see that we have a team of 10, let's say, and there is not one person dedicated full time to managing these work packages, it brings into question the impact, because I've seen many projects where there has not been a dedicated project manager function that is ultimately responsible for the cat herding. And I mean this positively, but we're researchers, scientists, we all march to a different drummer. And so it's a challenge to bring this together. And that if there's not someone there, then I strongly question impact. How? Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Following along with that, that's very true. And the other thing I think we have to be cognizant of is the fact that impact means that you have a professionalized group that does that. In other words, if there's a professor at a university who's in charge of exploitation, communication, all this sort of stuff, I'm going to be suspect, because that's not what a professor of whatever it is does. You know, if you say in the proposal, the university has a technology transfer group that is going to be part of this consortium and help, that may be better. I mean, but you have to take all these things equally seriously. You know, you cannot undervalue that as part of what makes you have a successful project.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. For me, it's impact, first of all, needs to be, again, well described, well detailed. I don't be afraid to split it down into sub-impacts, or have a main impact and then smaller type of impacts within that particular key impact, let's say, your proposal, your project tries to achieve. But again, have in mind how this impact can reach out to a different audience, a wider audience, and how it can be verified. How and by what? Have some, I would say, more tangible aspects in place, which can be easily also identified by the reviewers, the evaluators. And definitely, especially when it comes to impact, of course, you want to have a good mix of industry people, research people, and organizations. Universities will be there as well. But depending also on the call, on what you want to address, this needs definitely to have a wider outreach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now moving to, I'll start with you, Kim, again, with the implementation section. That's maybe, at least in my experience so far, one of the sections that people pay attention the least, right? They focus too much on the methods, focus too much on how to do things. And then see the implementation section as so tables you need to fill in and put numbers and just to get it through, right? So what is a good way in your view to show that what has been already mentioned here before, that the consortium has the capacity to deliver what's being promised? What is a way to do it? For example, parts A and B. Part A have like the papers, so that could like kind of back up, or the IPR that the company has on that technology or those technologies. How would you suggest?
I could go about this for hours, but going back to the work plan and the work packages, I mean, this is what we're talking about. And again, you have to treat all three sections seriously, equally seriously. And all too often, project coordinators, because they tend to be scientists, professors or whatever, they spend too much time on the excellence and not the rest. And if you have really a team effort where people take responsibility, then it's appropriate. But also remember that part of proposal writing is storytelling. So you're supposed to be telling the story, and the how the impact of the consortium, how it's going to work well together, et cetera, is the story. You know, and so you need to keep these narrative ideas in the back of your mind, because part of what you're doing is you're trying to entertain the evaluator and keep them interested in your project.
Thank you, Kim. Implementation and work packages. Yeah, definitely another significant element within the proposal. More details included, then more technical aspects within each work package. Of course, you'll have a full deliverables list and the milestones and your Gantt charts, PER charts, etc., etc. What I would like to highlight, again, try to complement that particular section and criterion as fully as possible, meaning it's not ideal to just say that we'll have a data management plan in place, for example. Yeah, everyone knows that should be the case. Provide maybe a draft, or provide a risk plan, or provide something that will be, again, showing that additional effort, that extra step, that extra motivation that this particular proposal has in place compared to another 20 proposals down the line, maybe. Gender aspects as well. Very, very important. Dissemination, communication. Very, very extremely important, especially having the public access now to deliverables, to publications, open data policy, etc., etc. It's becoming more and more important. So I would say to also equally prioritize your deliverables. Not having all or most of them as confidential, but have a good substantial number of them as public, open to a wider audience. Yeah, that's all I can think for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I'll twist again the question for you.
Okay.
How do you, in the implementation part, how would you suggest people monitor the progress? Because that's another important point for the for how you're going to implement things, right? So how would you suggest a good way to monitor the
Okay. So one thing, okay, I'll dive into this. Let's see. One thing is, like, when we're going to your work package, I would be monitoring work packages and outputs, and that I would urge people submitting these, look to existing practices in the real world. I come from the software world originally, so as an example, when I'm looking at these work packages, right, and you're asking like, how do I look at this? I'll give one very specific. When I see any software component added to these projects, and I see that it's just 2 months in the middle of a project, I'm an old software developer. I'm telling you, that's not realistic. Okay. And so if I'm answering the question here, what I would say is that it has to be realistic, and have someone from the outside that has actually implemented these components you're putting together. Look at this for it's realistic. So let's say you have a software component that's deliverable, and I've seen these, and it's the middle of the project. Well, being a software guy, I know that you need to know everything in advance before you start the coding. Yet the software is in the middle. It's a critical part, and there's going to be a high probability of failure. So what I'm getting back to here is that when you're adding these components, one, we're going to measure these. Two, have something uniform and measure. right? So when you're looking at your Gantt chart and your work packages, I'm going to give you a suggestion from the software world. Have items of work in somewhat equal size. That's a bit Kanban methodology, but I mean, let's say if we have a sprint every 2 weeks, maybe it's every 4 weeks, some point where you can monitor progress, get back to the team if you're not meeting the progress that you make, and course correct in order for the greater reporting goals. If I'm making sense right there. So you really have to be incremental, be able to verify that you have made progress, have consensus with your group, and have your project defined in this manner. So I'm able to easily read this, because what I'm going to do when I'm looking at it is I'm not going to assume that everything's going to work 100%. It rarely does in the real world. So if I'm looking at certain project goals, or let's say for delivery, right, and it doesn't look realistic, or it doesn't have any buffer factor, I'm going back to software development in the middle of a project that is key for the deliverable, right? And I would urge people to reevaluate and look at really what the total work effort is. And it's better to be realistic and be truthful than to try to compress something. Because if you get an evaluator like me that, let's say, knows software development, and I see that you're only dedicating 2 weeks, yet you're going to have a web front end expressing your entire project, I'm going to question that. I hope that answers the question.
Right. Well, thank you. Moving on to your next question. I'll turn it back to you again, Mike. Since you have a
Yeah.
software background, I will assume you also have a machine learning background.
Absolutely. Yes.
So then the next question is to start with you. Robustness in AI appears basically everywhere. So not just limited to Cluster 4 Digital. It's everywhere. It soon enough might even have I would assume it will have its own section in the ESR together with ethics. And how, let's say, I know it's a massive question, but like how do you
Number one, explainable. Explainable AI is not a nice to have. It is a must. And that is as per the European Commission. You need to not, if you have a project and someone like me is looking at it that writes code, okay, and you start throwing out terms like AI, I'm going to ask, what algorithms are you using? So when you're throwing out AI, okay, first of all, be very specific and get away from the marketing term AI and be very specific with what you're using. Let's say you're using a back propagation algorithm to navigate a Monte Carlo tree structure, right, in order to optimize something. You may not need to have this in your presentation, but be ready to answer at that level during evaluation. It's critical. Also, follow the European Commission EU guidelines. All AI must be explainable. You cannot have black box where you have inputs and you're not able to explain how you get the outputs. You need to be able to explain every step of the machine learning. Critical. Don't think that the whole team isn't going to know it and that buzzwords will work. Okay. And also, do not claim intellectual property rights on what we call AI if it's based on Hinton's backpropagation algorithm. There is a reviewer that's going to see this. And why I'm mentioning this is I've reviewed, probably 20 projects a year because I like to, and I've been seeing this a lot. AI. And then I'll ask, what do you mean by AI? And I'll get an answer, well, magic, basically. And I'll ask, no, what algorithms? What do you own in this? You say you have something patentable. You can't patent the algorithm. You possibly could patent the hyperparameters. You could patent the data gathering, but don't come to me and say that you own the AI when you're using a publicly available algorithm. I hope that answers the question. Be tight with this and don't assume that people don't know what's going on with AI. When you come to someone like me, I'm going to dismiss AI and I'm going to look at it as machine learning, and I'm going to be digging into your algorithms, the ones you claim to use.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I cannot agree more with what Mike suggested. Definitely AI, machine learning, these are buzzwords going about now more and more. What I would like to add on top of that is try to, of course, you need to explain, provide details, what kind of algorithms, inputs, outputs you're going to use for the development or of your software, your platforms, etc. But try to have in mind that the particular application area of your AI or your machine learning algorithms. Some industry sectors are more advanced than others. Some sectors might have issues that are and challenges very particular to that sector, and I have a couple of examples in mind. In which case AI may not be fully supportive or fully applicable, or would need to go through a number of barriers first in order to be fully applicable as such compared to some other sectors. I'm talking, for example, the maritime domain compared to land-based industries and applications and domains and IT. IT works fine, but you need also to consider the specific application area that the proposal and the call wants you to address.
One second, Kim. Let me change the question for you. No, for you. Kim, too.
Okay.
So instead of
Now that I've prepared my answer, you're going to change the question.
exactly to put you on the spot, to give us an insight on the, let's say, the consensus meeting. So after
Yeah.
that, so not the you evaluating each proposal. How does it work when you receive a proposal that is very strong on AI, that has a very strong AI aspect, but not all evaluators have a strong background in AI?
Yeah.
And then how do they come to an agreement?
Consensus, yeah.
Consensus.
Well, it's a classical consensus meeting. Is you have somebody like Mike who is the expert who explains and tries to go through it. But basically, it's somewhat simple about robustness of AI. You have to explain what you're talking about. That's all it is. And whether or not it's sufficient is another question. But you have to answer the question: do they explain what they're going to do? Is there some way that the expert can understand it? The expert may disagree, but they have explained it. And so that's important. It reminds me a bit of years ago when I was evaluating projects, they talked about, we're going to build a platform. And I remember throwing a proposal at a guy and saying, what platform? Explain to me what the platform is. And it's a bit the same way.
Mike agrees. Thank you.
The German word is genau. Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. I will open again the floor for questions if you have for anything that has been discussed until now. Do you have any?
Hello. I have a question. If you look at the different framework programs, FP7, Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, I mean, the shift went more and more to innovation and impact. That's my feeling. So how do you see that people cope with it? Do you see also exaggeration where you say, look, that's not realistic?
If you want me to answer it, yes, and if you mean innovation, you mean into the market, because innovation does not mean what the commission says it means. But there is a shift in the fact that they want a return on their investment, right? And that's what it is. And it is difficult, and that's why you cannot have a completely academically driven project, at least in Pillar 2. It has to have some other input, because you need to have return on investment of some sort. It may be a long-term return on investment, but you should be able to explain it. So yeah, that is an issue. And it is somewhat, but I think that reviewers are also changing, or evaluators, so that they are able to change and understand that concept also. At least that's been my experience.
From my side, definitely, I have seen a change in the overall kind of line of thinking in terms of awarding projects and providing eventually the funding to realize these projects. Definitely more and more comes in mind in how the society will benefit as well. So return on investment in terms of technical aspects or societal aspects. What I also see a change, at least in the culture of writing the proposals. So I can see sometimes a lot of what we were discussing before, a lot of buzzwords, a lot of kind of attractive phrases mentioned without though being substantiated by essence, by background. And this definitely needs to be there. And in most cases, this is picked up by reviewers as well. If it's just a highlight of a buzzword or a marketing term, rather than some more substantial information and expertise and beyond the state of the art and implementation, etc. That's why my suggestion would be to definitely have a good team, at least a driving team within the proposal, within the consortium, which will be contemplating, which would be also considering all these different aspects. To have for example, the buzzwords, definitely, to get you there, but have also the proof and the support and the verification that what you say will be achieved eventually.
Thank you, Mike.
I would add return on investment quickly to confirm what our other colleagues are stating, and that I would add that some of the effort for this is because we're seeing a lot of research in Europe that's not being commercialized. But I want to add something else to this. We don't have to commercialize all of our research in Europe. This is not the United States. We do things differently here. But we want to see tangible impacts for the investment. That doesn't necessarily mean commercial. As was mentioned, it could be societal impacts, but we want to see a tangible return on investment. Know that when you have a tangible return on investment at a greater level, it makes it easier for the politicians to advocate for funding for these programs. So we're all working together. And what I would say with these changes, really look at the outcome. Look at the story you create that can go to your MEP, that they can show and say, Horizon has done this. These people's lives were saved. These people have a better life. We opened up this path of research that is yielding benefits, right? So it's not just commercial, but think of return on investment back to our European community.
Right. Thank you, Mike. I think we have another question.
Hi, and thank you for the wisdom imparted. I have a question about open calls. So wherever a proposal has open calls, cascading calls, what are your recommendations what are you looking for in defining those in terms of maybe framework, budget allocation, scope of work, etc.?
Can you repeat the question, please? I didn't quite get it, at least myself. I don't know, Kim.
I sort of understand what you're saying. Usually it says actually in the call text that, you can use 60,000 euros and it should, it's basically an implementation of a technology in the cascading calls. I'm just amazed you could find them, because I find them impossible to find. There's so many and the portal doesn't help, but.
I'd have to add, keep your ear to the ground for idiomatically for finding these open calls. What I would say with the open calls is submit them, okay? Even if you fail, the practice of submitting for these open calls and being fast, because generally open calls are, at least the ones I've encountered, the notable example is the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. These are 5 to 6 page proposals. Don't worry, I would say not worry about speed. I mean, we're not worried about perfection, it's speed. Get it in there, make sure it applies to the call defined, apply and move to the next one. Get into the practice of applying for open calls regularly. Unless these are like multi-million euro open calls, that's a different structure. And I would approach that as a standard Horizon project, knowing that there might be a lot, there's not a deadline. Otherwise, most open calls I've been working with are 100,000 euros and below, and these are quick mechanisms. So I would say be quick with the quick mechanism. Don't focus on perfection. Focus on submissions and getting those submissions in there.
Thank you, Mike. We have another question.
Good morning, and thank you for all the information. That's very useful. I'm working for an SME. And so what I'm listening from this morning, there is no need to commercialize all the research we do. There is a greater willingness to do better innovation and impact. At the same time, so we are participating into a Two Horizon project where the TRL is not that high. So it's very hard for a SME to turn from TRL 4 to 9. So my question is, do you have a specific role that you would attribute to the SME? What do you expect from SME? Is it more in the impact? Is it more to leverage the research that is done and maybe to go to TRL 7, 8, but how is it by fundings? Do you have a golden triangle for SME or expectation?
I think it depends on what kind of SME you are, because they can be anything from, you could be the customer for what the project is developing. So you could set the criteria for the project. I mean, it could be that. I mean, there are all sorts of roles for an SME. It doesn't necessarily have to be commercialization.
Yeah. Overall, well, unless the call mentions specifically that SMEs need to be that much of a percentage of the consortium, need to be delivering such and such, etc. I believe there is space for SMEs to benefit from these calls, not only big enterprises or academia or research institutes, etc. And I think, especially within the Commission, there is a focus on how SMEs can further develop, how the results of the proposal of the project, if that is successful, will be uptaken by SMEs and drive them through to make them enhance their portfolio, the existing portfolio of services, of offerings, etc. So definitely a space for SMEs assets.
Mike?
I see SMEs as a critical component to these packages. Even if you have an output that's not commercial, by having an SME involved in a consortium, it provides, let's say, a sense of realism. If you will remember, I was mentioning project management. That's why you have an SME there. If you have a group of scientists, look, they're doing what they do well, but you have an SME that might add some, let's say, realistic inputs regarding the structuring of your work packages. And you're going to find that to be very useful. Also, the SME is a good story for the politicians to tell, that if they're able to say these SMEs within my voting area, right, are doing well because of Horizon Europe projects, that they employ more people, they maintain their health, they have greater economic opportunity. You see, the SME is where we commercialize, but again, what I'd like to state is that we're not commercializing this in the American way. The European way is different. And so keep that in mind. When you hear commercialization, don't think of the American model of, boom, unicorn, that. Think of the European way we do things, and that commercialization is a way for us to generate revenue, give politicians good stories, and keep our Horizon programs going.
Right. Thank you so much, Mike. Now move to, say, a more opinionated question that wasn't in the planned questions that we had. So you can talk from either an evaluator perspective or from a coordinator proposer perspective. That is the use of large language models to write your proposals or to help guide yourself writing these proposals.
No. Sorry. Look, I'm a human. I read things from a human. Spell checking is great. Grammar checking is great. If I smell anything coming out of ChatGPT, that's wasting my time. Really. Unless it's grammar cleanup. But if it's content creation, because I know how these LLMs work. They're happy to take a couple hours to explain. It's not magic. If I smell a ChatGPT created proposal that doesn't have a lot of human input or human thought, I'm going to flag that immediately. And within the rules that are assigned to me as an evaluator, I'm going to be very difficult.
Okay. Yeah, good.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's I wouldn't think second before saying this. Like, it definitely has to be a well-written proposal, well-checked. Again, there will be rounds and rounds of iterations. Definitely start early in the proposal preparation. There are, of course, drafts of the calls out there before the official date is coming out. So be early in the like contacting your potential partners. Might have a team already in place with whom you have worked well in the past, but don't take this as granted, because all these guys, as yourselves, will be contacted by probably other consortia or other partners or other people to join their efforts, etc., etc. So be early enough to try to formulate a good, strong team, core team, which will drive through the proposal, and then, of course, complement that expertise with additional partners, wherever these are needed, of course, depending on the call's objectives. Yeah, it's I would say it's a continuous process. It's not an easy process. It's becoming, as I said before, more and more competitive over the last few years, but for good reason, because these are public money, a lot of millions, tens of millions of public money, which need to be distributed in as a rightful way and fair way as possible to develop high quality research with high quality impact as well.
With all due respect, I must leave right now. I'm actually going into another meeting regarding funding for the European Defence Fund. I thank you for your time, and I apologize for having to leave right now.
No worries. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to repeat what you want me to answer?
Well, I can change the question. So the first question was using large language model, but Mike totally disagrees. Should never be used. But how is that different from using a consultancy to help you?
Well, I don't think you should use a consultancy either, but that's a different question. Not to write your proposal.
Right.
And I can also say, and this is going to sound really stupid, but no, it's not sounding stupid. It's sounding weird, but I like the intellectual process of developing a project and writing a proposal. I think it's really interesting to get into the discussions with a potential team and try to figure out the best way to do things. And that is something that has to be done. And the other thing about ChatGPT or large language models is it's pretty obvious to me, at least this point in time, when somebody's using it. And so it's like when people use templates for project management. It's clear that it's a template and that they haven't thought through it. You know, it's the same way with ChatGPT now. And the final thing is, you know, you have to write deliverables and such afterwards. So unless you have gotten into the process of writing these things, unless you understand the sort of philosophy behind the proposal, you're not going to be able to write a good deliverable either. So you have to look at it in the totality. So yes, it's a crutch. It might be a way to do a first draft or something, or parts of a first draft, but you have to write it yourself.
Thank you, Kim. I have time, I think, for one last question from the floor, if we have any. I do.
Okay, hi. Thanks so much for enlightening us. I was just wondering, what does it take to become an evaluator, and do you recommend it?
Sorry, come again? I didn't quite hear you very well.
How
How to become
How
an
to become
evaluator?
an evaluator?
Do you recommend?
To become an evaluator? Well, the sky's the limit. It's why not? Why not? It's an interesting experience, I would say. It is an educating experience, definitely. It's a learning experience. It's seeing different styles and ways of thinking and presenting a particular idea in a proposal. It's and of course it's yeah, I would say it opens your mind to do a different perspective, or seeing like the being on the other side of writing a proposal and seeing the proposal and the call from or with the eyes and the perspective of an evaluator. It helps you also write better proposals this way.
First thing you have to do to become an evaluator is register as an evaluator or potential evaluator. So you have to register on the funding and tenders portal. Okay, so that's the first thing you do. And right now, of course, the evaluations are generally done by the agencies, but also with input from the commission. So you need to talk to the people that you know in the agencies, but particularly in the commission, and say that you've just registered as an evaluator, you're interested in doing it, etc. Because they're the ones that choose who the evaluators are going to be, because there are thousands and thousands of names in the portal. Whether or not you should do it, absolutely, it's loads of fun. As you say, it's an educational experience. You then talk to people from, all over the world for that matter. You get to listen to what the commission is thinking, all this sort of stuff. I think it's a grand experience. You don't do it for the money, that's for sure. But it's for the intellectual exercise.
Thank you very much. So just one more. Sorry. Yes.
If I may be the last one. Thank you very much for all the interesting information, but so far we haven't touched the SSH inclusion. And I'm wondering, many topics are tagged with SSH. What would be, in your opinion, a recommendation how to do it? What you have seen as best practices?
You're talking to the right person. My degree is in medieval Welsh history, and I'm in a technical program. So obviously there's an aspect of that. I think that you should not think of it as how do we add an SSH person. We have to think of it as you need an SSH person always in a project, particularly technical projects. You need them for many different reasons. And if nothing else, just for somebody who's thinking outside the box from what you're used to. So I think that's an assumption. And that they have an important role. They have an important role in communication and in framing the questions that you may have, and so forth and so on. So I don't think you should think about how do I approach it. You just do it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with him. It's a necessity. More and more, maybe not so much in the past, but more and more, and definitely now for these upcoming calls, it is a necessity and should be thought of on how to present, not just tick off the box of I've included this and that, but definitely put some more thinking and again, some part of the implementation, how you're going to achieve this.
Do you think it is good that you have as a partner, somebody with this expertise, or maybe as an advisory board, or different approaches?
To me, or do you want to?
No.
Well, to me, it's more of a. It depends on the actual call and the objectives, what the call is asking for. Some cases it can be or needs to be actually an active partner with a budget attributed, etc. In some other cases, more technically oriented calls can be a strong advisory board member. Yeah, that's what I would say.
What's appropriate?
All right. Thank you so much. So just to wrap up, I would like to ask one final word from each one of you, just as your final thoughts and recommendations for anyone writing a proposal.
Try to wrap up the last hour or so into one sentence, one long sentence, or be prepared and be I would say early enough in preparing and thinking of the proposal. Read very, very carefully the call itself. There are always keywords in there you can highlight, you can underline, you can whatever you need to do to make them obvious, not only to yourselves, but communicate them to the rest of the consortium. If that's you who is leading the consortium, try to get through these key messages, these key words across the entire consortium, so that there is a focus on what the call is asking, but then at the same time, not losing the bigger picture that we have just described. So that would be my takeaway from this discussion. And of course, be early enough, expect to go through a number of iterations. Of course, it will take time, it will take effort. You might not get a proposal at the very end, but this is not lost work, definitely not lost work. There will be other proposals, other calls, similar or maybe not so similar, but definitely the experience you will get from preparing the proposal, talking to partners, getting involved even with the admin parts of the proposal itself is a very, very useful experience.
I was going to say, proposal writing's fun. Come on, have a good time. Think of it positively. It's a way to do what you want to do. It's a way to get to know people. It's a way to be creative, to learn new things. You know, have a good time with it.
Thank you, and talk to your NCPs. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Iraklis. Applause for them, please. And with that, we conclude our panel. I think the two are going to stay around if you want to ask more questions. Thank you for coming.
And thank you, Leo, also, and his team for organizing this session.